For several decades now, welcome back, by the way,
Thank you.
because the matter we're about to discuss is a matter that really causes me a lot of pain. We're looking at the education system, and for decades now, the education sector has witnessed a steady decline, and the stakeholders fear that if this trend continues, if nothing is done to arrest the situation, then we are heading for the edge of the precipice. The problems, especially of primary education over the years, have been described by many as dearth of infrastructure, funding, inadequate curriculum, and management of personnel. So how do we find ourselves in this pass? We have with us in the studio a professor of history, Professor Nkechi Chukwu.
What did I have there?
Nkechi. Gloria.
Chukwu.
Professor Gloria Chukwu. And we are also expecting Yomi Fawoyimi to join us in the course of this segment. Now, Professor, what happened once upon a time a child, whether in primary school or secondary school or university in this country, could compete with any child in any of those grades anywhere in the world? So what happened that we now find ourselves in this pass?
Well, it's unfortunate. I think the problem started with the government takeover of primary and secondary education. When the missions were in charge, the standard was high.
Are you absolutely sure of that? Because the standard in government schools was also very high. King's College, Queen's College.
I'm coming.
Okay.
Remember, King's College, Queen's College were established during the colonial period.
The federal government colleges.
And we are run mostly by expatriate personnel.
Sure.
Then when Nigeria became independent, the first decade, the 1970s, maintained that high standard. But of course, over time, the economy started declining, and of course, corruption escalated, and funding of public educational institutions declined.
It looks like wherever you look in Nigeria, whichever sector you're looking at, there's corruption hidden there somewhere.
Oh, yes. There was. I remember growing up, and based on a few research I've done, when communities established schools, there was vested interest. The schools were managed by selected and committed personnel, teachers and headmasters and mistresses, and they were monitored. There was accountability. But when government took over, followed by proliferation of states, education began to decline. And the general attitude is what belongs to the state belongs to the nation. And that affected attitude to work. That, to me, was part of the problem.
Now, we've since been joined by Mr. Yomi Fawoyimi, who's an education consultant. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yes, I think I'll just put to you the same question that you just finished answering, which is, how did we arrive at this pass from a place where our children, whether at primary or secondary or at tertiary level, could compete anywhere in the world? I mean, children were getting scholarships from abroad to go school abroad. And suddenly we find ourselves with graduates who can't even speak correct English. How did we arrive here?
Okay, a couple of things. I mean, so she has identified corruption, one of which that I find most significant for me are two critical things. One, lack of a vision for what we want to achieve with education. And secondly, poor leadership. So you had a combo, I mean, what you call a double whammy of a visionless system and lack of leadership. Now, I'm not describing lack of leadership by just the quality of leadership, but by the fact that there was no leadership. So between 1958 and 1978, the golden years of education in Nigeria, the time we were referring to, Nigeria had 5 ministers for education. Between 2004 and today, we have had 18. So what has happened is that you have had a situation where you had, we had a minister that did 11 straight years for education. People talk about the glory days of the Awolowo Wars and all of those things, but if you go back to check in history, the minister, or the commissioner as it was called under Awolowo, started that process 4 years before it was launched. So there was a lot of pre-planning and a lot of implementation out there. But what led to the planning was because of a vision. So you didn't have a vision, then you had poor leadership, which was also changing like you could change anything in the world. When you're talking about 18 ministers within the space of 20 years, then you're meaning that there's not going to be continuity. And you know the way we do leadership in Nigeria, once somebody new comes in, everything the other guy was doing, what they didn't do well. So visionlessness coupled with poor lack of leadership is a double whammy. Nothing can be worse than that.
Professor, you're still in the system. We need to talk about the curriculum itself. We understand that schools don't teach history anymore. And they don't teach civic studies anymore, even though we hear that some schools are trying to reintroduce those subjects. So, for instance, a young man I met in the US is a pilot, went to school in Nigeria, and ran away about 2 years ago because he couldn't get a job in Nigeria. So in the course of discussion, we were talking about Nigeria, and I mentioned Yakubu Gowon, and he said, "Who is he? Is he a footballer?" And I wanted to punch his face. And I said, "You are over 30 years old, you're a Nigerian, and you're asking me if Yakubu Gowon is a footballer? You need to go and learn a little bit about your country."
Yes.
So if these children don't know any history, they don't know about the past of their country,
Yes.
how are they going to plan for the future of their country?
It is difficult to do that. And it's only in Africa, I want to generalize now, that history has been relegated to the background. And Nigeria is one of those countries in Africa.
Coincidentally, you're a professor of history.
And of course, I remember when I was teaching at Imo State University in Owerri before I left, we were struggling to get enrollment of students of our program. And we decided to come out, we decided to become innovative by adding international studies in order to attract more students. Because, of course, I can understand everywhere all over the world, the humanities and social sciences are struggling behind the sciences at the STEM courses. But the difference is that in Nigeria, especially, history has been relegated to the background. And it's difficult for a country who pays little or no attention to history to advance. My colleague just mentioned the lack of focus, lack of vision. How can you have a vision when you don't know where you're coming from? And so to me, it is a welcome development if some schools are beginning to revive and reintroduce history and civic education in their curricula. That will be wonderful. It is important for us to go back and teach our children, our youth, their history. They need to know about their heritage. We talk about intergroup relationships. How did our great-grandfathers interacted? Now we are talking of ethnic division, ethnic politics. There was a time, I'm not minimizing the fact that there were intergroup wars and so forth, but the level of ethnic divisiveness has reached a maximum point in Nigeria. And it has to be addressed by teaching our children, one of the ways anyway, their history, their heritage. And again, I was discussing with somebody I just met about lack of respect among our youth. that is another problem when parents no longer do their job because they are either overwhelmed by other requirements in terms of career choices and career demands and so forth. So it is important that we go back to the study of Nigerian history, especially the various ethnic nationalities.
Okay, okay. We'll just take a short break and we'll come back and continue the conversation.
Well, before we go on that break, I think I wanted to just clarify on this history part, because it's true that the bit of history, when you say we need to teach us our history in order to bring back unity in the country, do you think we're ready to go back to learning that history? Because it looks as if the older generation, and that's why it was taken out of school, that's what some people say, it was taken out of school. I mean, we've not forgotten it. It was taken out of school because the older generation don't want to think about the atrocities that were committed back in history. And they think if they let the younger ones learn this history, the unity that they are hoping to achieve won't be possible.
That is a mistake. It is unbelievable that the history, the major catastrophic event that has befallen this country since independence, I mean the Civil War, is not taught in Nigerian university or school system. Students need to know their history, no matter how ugly, because you learn from those ugly experiences in order not to repeat yourself.
Okay, all right. We'll take that break now. Please don't go away.